Good morning, Mr. Nat King Cole introduces you to Viewpoint, the program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. This program usually starts with a kudo or two, and in the on-air conversation we had in the studio there just a few minutes ago, it gave me a sudden inspiration for a new kudo. And that is the clowns out there in Washington put on a better show than Ringling Brothers, Barnum Bailey's professional clowns ever put on. It's just disgusting. I don't care what party you are. They're up there presenting themselves. I don't want to get. I better stop right there. We better, because I may get in serious trouble. Mrs. Busby, why don't you introduce our guest this morning before I get in trouble?
I'd be proud to do that. Joe Schaler and Bill Dennis are with us today. And
You're proud to introduce those two dudes?
Pardon?
You're proud to introduce those two dudes?
Well, I am. They wear red shirts. They look nice.
Yeah, they clean up real well.
They showered and brushed their hair and whatever they've got.
Okay.
Anyway, they're representing the Marine Corps League, the Sergeant Bob Grau detachment.
That's a serious kudo right there.
Yes, it is. Very much so. And you've served your country and done well by yourselves, and now you do all these things for the community. And the Veterans Park, of course, we all know where that is, and it looks so nice. And you were responsible also for the veterans' pictures up around the square, weren't you?
That came from a Rotary. Lincoln Rotary.
Was it? That was a nice touch, too, wasn't it?
But the Marine Corps League was very instrumental in encouraging people to do that.
Yes.
It was successful and continued to be that way.
Well, it cost me $50 to get my brother's picture up there. I don't know whether he's worth it or not, but I just fulfilled our father's expectation that we would hang from a courthouse flag someday.
Oh, my gosh.
So, by the way, that's a nice gesture. Those of us who are up there hanging, not struggling to get down, are honored to have our pictures up there. It's a neat thing. But the Marine Corps League, Judy, you're exactly right. They've done a tremendous. Joe and Bill served in uniform. They've continued to serve in what we call mufti, or civilian clothing, and in a great manner. I know that those of us that's kind of one of the reasons we have these two gentlemen here. Out where I live at the Christian Village, they've done a tremendous amount of little things and big things. They were instrumental in putting up the flags that I was able to get from Walmart as a donation, which we appreciated very much. And not only that, they've come back and straightened out the larger flagpoles, take them out of the ground and fix them. Every time I turn around, there's some little thing that the Marine Corps League has done for us out there at the Christian Village. So,
but those little things count up pretty quickly.
Oh, you betcha.
And it takes a lot of time and effort, and takes away from your watching as the world turns or whatever. But you do so much. And speaking of flags, Bill, one thing that you do that probably isn't your biggest job, but it's one I particularly appreciate. My poor flag that was on the front of my house just really got beat up. It was, and you think, before you realize how busy you guys are, you think, well, what do I do with it? It doesn't seem like something you'd put in the trash, right?
Exactly.
No, we don't do that.
We don't.
We tire flags properly, and the Marine Corps League has been instrumental in doing that. Matter of fact, we had a retirement ceremony at Christian Village and retired over 75 flags and buried the remains on the property. Also worth noting, and Bill hit on this a while ago, all the flagpoles at the Christian Village are now vertical. Many of them were leaning and needed in maintenance, but we performed the maintenance, restrung the ropes, and it was a joint effort. A lot of the Marines showed up, 6 or 8 of them, and did a marvelous job. And we're very proud of that fact that we were able to do that.
But think of the hours that you built up doing that nice service for people, and it wasn't like you were government officials, you didn't get paid high bucks for that, did you?
No, but we reminded the government officials that they are paid well.
And do very little most of the time. The Marine Corps, let's talk about the beginning, the inception of the Marine Corps League here in Logan County. We have what we call the Bob Grau Detachment, is that correct?
That's correct. Uh-huh.
I thought that was pretty neat to name the Marine Corps League after Bob Grau.
Well, Bob had a tour in the Marine Corps and was a good Marine, and we felt that would honor him by naming
I'm interested in hearing you say good Marine because once a jarhead, always a jarhead.
Yeah, there seems to be some camaraderie there. It's an institution and a fraternity that I'm proud to belong to.
Well, exactly. That's an earned credit. I don't know why I'm so enthusiastic about these jarheads. When I was a kid in the Air Corps down in Wilmington, North Carolina, I didn't get to come home for Christmas. My first Christmas, it was 1943, and I remember that well. And so I got a 3-day pass on Christmas Eve, and another guy and I, we went into town, and I don't know where we were. And anyway, first thing I know, we're talking to these young ladies. And it wasn't but a few minutes later after I thought, well, this could be an interesting evening. So a couple of Marines walked in, full dress uniforms, white Sam Brown belts, white caps, done to the nth degree. 2 minutes later, I looked up and those ladies were gone. So I always had a warm spot, not necessarily, in my heart for Christmas Eve 1943 and the Marines and how they gave me a present of getting rid of those girls.
My brother went to Vietnam and he called himself a ground pounder.
That's a synonym for infantry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, he was a ground pounder.
Be it Army or the Marine Corps.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, the Marine Corps has ground pounders too.
Oh, my, yes.
Matter of fact, they have better ones.
Oh, well, I don't doubt that at all. I would have just assumed.
They want half your audience right there.
Well, I think of the South Pacific, not the musical. I'm talking about when our boys hit those shores down there, those various islands down there. And almost always inevitably they were led by Marines. And you get a wonderful history in your Corps. And I always thought the Marine had a special way to be proud, and they should be. Once a Marine, always a Marine is what they tell one another. And those of us who trained rigorously with the Air Force basic training, I laugh when I say that because
so do I, Bill. But thank you for your service.
It wouldn't begin to measure up to what the Marine Corps did in the first week of their basic training. But in any event, we're glad to have you guys here. We wanted to talk about the Marine Corps League and the things that we do here in Lincoln, Logan County. Judith mentioned the All Veterans Park there at the confluence of College Avenue and Pekin Street and Union Street. That was a beautiful thing when it was done. But like all things, time takes its toll. And somebody in your organization made the decision that time had taken its toll on that place, and the bricks were uneven and so forth. It needed some attention. And the net result is, and I want the public to understand this, that was completely, it wasn't torn up, but each brick was removed and washed. Lovingly washed. Each brick had the name of somebody who had served their country on it. And the foundation was redone, leveled out, and the entire park area was rebuilt. And that was done by Marine volunteers. And
Bill, that was an effort really spearheaded by Joe and his deceased wife, Melanie, because they were really out front on that. Mm-hmm. And it's true that the Marines stepped up behind Joe and Melanie and really worked hard on that.
Those are the kinds of things that take so much time and effort.
Yes.
And people kind of back off and say, well, I think next year we better put this on our list, you know? But you just stepped right up to the plate and went out there and did it, and God love you. There's just all kinds of those kinds of jobs, and they make such a difference.
That job was not done over a period of 1 day or 2 days. It was done over a period of weeks.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when projects are strung out over a long period of time, you suffer fade out. That wasn't the case here. These people showed up. And again, it was indicative of Joe's leadership and the help that Melanie put forward. We had the sign was provided to us by the Eagles Club, and the Marine Corps League installed that. Jim Harneke, the commander of the Marine Corps League here, works for Ameren. He was able to get a LED light that flooded the whole area, which really improved it. And so it was a joint effort, and I'm very proud of the fact that it was completed the way it was.
Yes, it's lovely. It really is.
Now, by the way, 648-5510. Our guests this morning, Bill Dennis and Joe Schaler, Marine Corps League and veterans of their active service on your behalf and our country. And as I say, proud Marines. We always called them jarheads just for the heck of it because somebody else put that on them. There's not a jarhead in the bunch as far as I'm concerned. Those particularly here locally that do so much. The Veterans Park, if somebody has a family member they want to get a brick in there for, that's still open, is it, gentlemen?
Yes. Yes, we have, Joe, another 100 locations, 110. But we're coming down to the end, but there's still openings.
Well, I'm proud to say I've got myself and 3 other family members, and that's a neat thing to have 4 of my family with a brick down there. My dad says, well, I'm not going to tell you what my dad said.
Maybe your dad was like my dad, huh?
Yeah. Judy's dad once told her, gentlemen, don't let people think you're stupid. Just open your mouth and prove it.
Said many ways.
He had his ways of keeping me humble.
Bill, you can contact the Marine Corps League, and we can provide applications for bricks.
Okay, how would one contact the Marine Corps League?
Well, I guess people know Joe and myself and Jim Harneke, any Marine Corps League member.
I'll tell you how they can do it. The Veterans Commission down there at the
VAC
building
would be able to provide that information.
Yeah.
They have that there, and that's an easy location to get to.
Easy location to find, yes. And that location, folks, is the Dr. John Logan building. That's where you go pay your county taxes if you want to drive up.
Yeah,
so
at the other end of the building.
Yeah. Make sure you go to the east end of the building, not to the west end of the building.
And you have transportation services for the veterans that are in nursing homes. You know, I bet that's kind of enjoyable.
It's interesting, Judy. It's not a new endeavor, but it's one that's beginning to materialize. And of course, Showbus and Capsule provide a lot of transportation, but
yes,
on occasion, myself and other Marine Corps League members have transported people to the VA Center in Peoria. Even been involved in going as far as Danville, because a lot of times the VA is not really easy to deal with about changing appointment times.
Yes.
So if it becomes a crisis, we're there to do that, and normally we were able to accommodate most of them. There are some occasions that we can't, but we do that.
Oh, how much they must appreciate.
Well, they do, and I think it's a service that particularly the retired Marines, Marine Corps League members, are certainly willing to do it. We provide this kind of started because of the Eminence Veterans Breakfast, and we got
Eminence Christian Church. Let's talk about that just a minute, because that's a nice little affair that you put on. You sponsor that?
Well, we don't put it on. Eminence Church does, but we certainly support it financially. And that's where the transportation thing began, because we outgrew the bus very quickly, so we had to have people. And it's really quite an experience. If veterans, any veteran in Logan County or any visiting veteran, we certainly encourage them to come to that. I don't have the date yet. It's in October. Oh, no, it's in November, I guess it is, in Joe.
Yeah, I think it's November 9th.
It's coming up, and we encourage everybody to show up. They put on a tremendous meal, work very hard. And it's a pro bono. I mean, I can't believe how some of these nursing home residents eat so meagerly at the nursing home, and they go back for seconds and thirds at the church. So,
home cooking, you know.
Yeah, it makes quite a difference.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yes.
So that's how that transportation thing really kind of got started.
Well, that's a valuable assistance for some people. Some of us have families that we can still do. As far as we need transportation to the VA clinics. By the way, I've had, a lot of people complain. We've heard a lot of times people complain about the VA. I've never had a bad moment with them, and I've been with them for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
And I get really good service, primarily from the Springfield office. Now, I understand we've opened up a VA center in a medical center in Bloomington.
Not yet, Bill. That's online to start when, Joe? Probably February or March. I think it was the
I
target
think I'll
date.
just opt to stay in Springfield because
Well, you're familiar with it. That makes sense. Yeah.
I'm satisfied with what they do down there. But the transportation that's a big help to families. They don't know how to get Grandpa down there. Somebody's going to take him down there.
Right.
I think, Bill, you rode up with us one time. How many people did I have in the van?
We had three.
Three? Mm-hmm. And you're right. I've never had a bad experience with the VA, although I'm sure that some people have. And I think the VA is trying to make some moves that will plug these holes where people were dissatisfied. And Joe, certainly, you've had a lot of experience with the VA.
Yeah.
Another thing you do is support the honor flight. By that I mean meeting the veterans as they come home from Washington on their honor flights.
Well, not only that, Bill, we support them financialy. We work very hard to do that. Matter of fact, we have a cookout at IGA. Is that for the honor flight, Joe?
You mean Saturday?
Saturday, yes.
Yeah, that'll go into our donation fund, and some of that we try to help support the guardians, because sometimes the guardians can't afford to go with the veteran.
Yeah, we should explain that a guardian will
well, actually, they're called chaperones.
Pay up front $400 for the privilege of escorting Grandpa. Right. Or an uncle or a friend.
Right. And,
I came back from my flight 10 years or so ago, and I was so enthused with what they'd done, I volunteered to be a guardian. And they told me I was too old. About broke my heart.
70's the cutoff.
Well, and in truth, when I thought about it, I really was kind of upset at first. Then I got to rethinking that. And a guardian has to be able to reach in these buses and take wheelchairs out and set them up. And those are things that my back would not allow me to do these days. So they were right, but it sure broke my heart for a while.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, I'm a little sensitive about that age limit, too. I'm beyond that point.
Yeah.
But it cost a lot of money. By the way, just as a quick aside, my brother's involved in the honor flight out there in Phoenix, Arizona, and that becomes a lot more expensive because they have to put them up overnight in Washington.
Yeah.
They fly out there, they're over there overnight, and they spend the next day doing all the touring. Yeah. They spend that night back there, then they fly them back the third day. Right. So that's a very expensive thing.
It's expensive and it's tiring for some of the veterans, the older veterans.
I wasn't a bit tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned wheelchairs and getting them in and off of a bus. You also have a bit of equipment, wheelchairs, etc.
Well, Judy, that's kind of a new endeavor for the Marine Corps League, and we've been involved in it now, I think, probably a little over a year. And we found that the VA and our medical system as a whole doesn't react very quickly to needs. It's a matter of paperwork and things.
You've made Joe Schaler snicker.
Yeah, a little more than that probably. So what we saw was an opportunity to provide mobility equipment to veterans or their spouses faster than the VA or the medical system can provide it. And of course, if they do, we can go back and retrieve our equipment and move on to somebody else.
Right.
It's on a lending basis only, and you have to provide a DD-214 to prove your service. But presently, we have 4 mobility pieces in the field. One at St. Clara's, one at Christian Village. We did some repair work on a unit at Christian Village also through the Marine Corps League. We also are trying to provide low vision equipment. We have 1 reader in the field right now, and the same man also has a power wheelchair. And so this is an area that's kind of new to us. We're developing it, and it seems to be working well. Again, it's on a lend basis. We're not giving this equipment to you. We put it in the field. When you're finished with it, we come retrieve it and put it in service someplace
In the first place, when you're finished with it, you might just as well take care of it and clean it up and give it back to you, because you don't need it anymore. And what a boon for somebody who does need something like this. And you don't need it 3 months from now. You need it today.
Yeah, 20 minutes ago was too late in many cases.
Yeah.
And so it's working out well. There's some bumps in the road, but for the most part, we're doing okay. We have hospital beds, we have mobility equipment, we have walkers, we have crutches, we have canes. We even have hospital mattresses, foam mattresses. So if there's a need, we can fill it. Now, along those same lines, Judy, we're also active in providing wheelchair ramps. We have a portable unit that we've installed in a couple of locations, and we're looking at the possibility of putting in a permanent unit at the Heritage Museum for flight, if it's approved. And I have no reason to believe it will not be. So it is more accessible to people in wheelchairs and mobility equipment.
Bill, you used the phrase working out well. What hasn't worked out very well for this fellow this morning is I got so engrossed in what we're doing this morning that I forgot to remember that we have sponsors. And we're going to honor them right now. Go right ahead, Mr. Ash. Welcome back. Hope you paid attention to those commercials. By God, they pay for this. So we have to give them all the obeisance that we need to do that.
Yeah.
Our guest this morning at Viewpoint is Mr. Bill Dennis, Marine Corps veteran, and Mr. Joe Schaler, another Marine Corps veteran. Joe reminded us off air as where the term jarhead came from. So go ahead, Mr. Schaler. Tell us how the people call the Marines jarheads. So
just from many, many years ago, the way their haircut style was straight up, flat top, and somebody tagged them that they look like they have jars on top of their head. So
they became jarheads from that point on.
Jarheads. That stuck. So
there have been other things that have been just made up on the spur of the moment that probably weren't quite as acceptable as that.
Yeah, I can tell you 2 or 3 things my father said, but I don't think.
Let's talk for just a minute about Toys for Dots. That's been one of your projects for a long time.
The countryside over, yes.
Yeah, a lot of promotion with that, and I would say, of my experience with it, that Logan County and Lincoln are huge contributors to that every year. I mean, it's overwhelming to me to see. I know Melanie and we would take care of things in Mount Pulaski to retrieve toys and cash. And Mount Pulaski is a very giving city. We stopped at the bank there the first time we ever did it, and we were going to make a couple of trips back there. And we showed up the first time, and this little bank, the entire foyer was full of bags and boxes. This is like 3 weeks before it was over with. And there was a lady at the teller, working with the teller. And she looked over at us and she said, "Are you going to come back again next week? Because I have to go home and get my gift and bring it if you're not coming back. We will be back next week. We took that first time, I remember, over a period of a couple of weeks, 3 truckloads out of that one bank
God love
of
'em.
toys.
That's
And they
folks
do
over
that
at
every
Vinegar-
year.
Folks over at Vinegar Hill. They are a great
Just
group.
think how many little people
Yes.
you made a Merry Christmas for.
Yeah. But I know being in the rural fire department is very kind to let us distribute the toys there. And if anybody was to go in there the day before that and see all the work that, people like Bill and all the other Marines and volunteers that show up, I mean, you'd think they were at the North Pole. I mean, it's everything from a little doll to bicycles to electric powered vehicles in there. I mean, it runs the gamut, and people are just extremely generous with that. And to the point, sometimes you have a carryover. I mean, you have to store them because we have more there than what can be taken. And that doesn't happen very often, where you can go someplace and the kids have that kind of choice, and the parents have that kind of choice, and still have an excess of it instead of a shortage of it. And I know in Springfield sometimes they actually have a shortage because of the number of families that come in. We in Logan County
Speaks to
don't
the
have
need.
that. So, and then the next day, if you go to Freedom Hall, the VFW auxiliary sponsors Breakfast with Santa, and a lot of times you go in there and you'll see the same kids come through,
Sure.
and they're in there to see Santa Claus and get their stuff to color on and a nice breakfast and everything, and you kind of put those two together. It's a nice weekend and kind of helps them get through the Christmas season.
And it's the
mentioned
same
the-
Marines the next day helping
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Veterans of Foreign Wars. They have their building out there on 5th Street, right across from Postville Courthouse. That's where Marine Corps League meets. Everybody has to have a place to meet. And therefore, because you use that as a meeting place, you help considerably. The Marine Corps League helps considerably in the upkeep and the expense of the VFW building, and that can be a very expensive thing.
Yeah, and it has been over the years, which that's why I try to refer to, if you look at the sign, it says Freedom Hall, and then of course has the VFW and then the Marine Corps League listed under it, and Bill, Jim Harneke, Mike Downey, a number of them have spent hundreds of hours doing work there to maintain that and improve that building, and there's still several projects yet to go, but it's gone through a major overhaul the last few years, and
Which
it's a
shows
work
even
in
from the
progress.
outside.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, it's always the same Marines who have shown up to do that. And it's a corps of guys that answer the call. If we got a problem, for instance, the wheelchair ramp at the VFW was provided by the Marine Corps League efforts. And I say that, and not in a hubris way, because I don't want to do any bragging, but the facts in the case are they show up, and it really makes quite a difference in the maintenance of the building, and the upkeep, and the long-term use of the building. The VFW has experienced really a fall off in membership, primarily because of the age involved.
Well, yes, I was going to say that we have an age factor here with all of us that, when we get to be where we are, we don't go out as much as we used to. When we were younger, a night out at a Marine Corps League meeting or a VFW meeting, that's kind of a little social thing as well.
Right.
As well as being part of the brotherhood, so to speak.
Right.
But when you get older, you seem to be more content to sit down and not get out so much at night.
Yeah.
Bill, getting back to some of this assistance equipment we have, if there's a need in the audience, please feel free to contact the Marine Corps League, and if you qualify, we'll certainly try to accommodate you. We have some equipment available, and if there is a need, please feel free to contact us. Again, the requirements would be service in the armed forces with a DD-214 for either the veteran or their spouses.
One of your projects that I hadn't heard as much about, certainly as we do Toys for Tots, you financially support vets helping vets through the Marine Rose Fund. What does that entail?
Well, the Marine Rose Fund is kind of like our poppies.
Okay.
And it's a fund that we're able to, it's a discretionary fund that we can use to support meaningful things for veterans and the causes we're involved in. Vets Helping Vets is an organization I've become familiar with because of my visiting the VA in Peoria. I saw this man up there one day in a mobility scooter that had mud flaps and antennas and lights and flashers and stuff. And of course, I've been repairing some, so I was kind of interested in where he got this thing. And I introduced myself to him, and his name is Donald Yarborough. And I said, Don, I says, where'd you get this scooter? He said, I built it.
Oh.
And I said, well, that's interesting because I need to have some of your expertise. And so we started talking, and we've developed quite a rapport with him. He's provided batteries at a very low cost, where we were spending maybe $150, $200 for batteries. We can do it now for $50 or $75. So he's been very instrumental in trying to help us with the mobility stuff. But it's kind of interesting. He does this all pro bono. He covers many different counties. Matter of fact, he was selected the Hero of the Year or something with the Red Cross. He's been on TV several times. He and his wife run this thing out of their house, and they're within a stone's throw of the Illinois River, and he's been flooded out several times. But ICC, the community college, come out and poured concrete for him. It's quite really interesting. Joe and I went up there, a week ago, Joe? And the whole basement of his house is just filled with mobility equipment. And so it's a contact that we're really fortunate to have. He's very knowledgeable, and I got trapped not too long ago. There's a lockout system on some of these mobility carts. If you punch certain buttons, they won't operate. Well, in being naive as I am, I couldn't figure it out, tore it all apart, and couldn't figure it out, so I called him. No, first of all, I called Florida, and they said, well, send the computer down, we'll fix it for you, it costs you $400. Well, that's really an alternative I really want to exercise.
Yeah.
So I called Joe, and I said, Joe, this is my problem. He says, which way's the lights flashing? I told him. He says, punch this, punch that, but within 30 seconds, I'm running.
Oh, my gosh.
So that's an asset that's very, very important. And again, it's a Marine, it's a guy that he and his wife do this pro bono, and it's Veterans Helping Veterans in Peoria, Illinois.
And he's a disabled veteran.
Yes, he had lost both feet in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Both of them?
He walks on prosthesis.
And because of his expertise with his own convenience.
Well, he got angry with the VA because they said he didn't qualify for a power chair because his hands were mobile and he could push a wheelchair. He said, well, that's true, I can, but he said, I like to go places, I get awfully tired going a quarter of a mile away.
Yeah.
So he built himself a chair, and out of that sprung this Veterans Helping Veterans.
I just envy people like that, you know?
Well, I certainly admire him. He has stepped up. He really has.
Yes.
I want to do the Kay. If you allow me to strike the match, I want to light a hot button that Mr. Dennis sits on. Mr. Dennis, you have more than a passing interest in the property which we used to know as Lincoln State School. And he has been working, Bill has been working, trying to get the state to make better use of those facilities. So I pass the baton to you, sir.
Well, Bill, you have lit a fire, and it's probably best that I turn this over to Joe because we've become a good cop, bad cop thing. As I said in our interview before, I'm already to take my pitchfork and head to Springfield. But we'd like to have 1, 2, or 3 of those units, the new buildings at LDC, set aside for veterans. And not that I want to put Quincy out of business or anybody else, but there's a need. We have veterans on the street, and from a retraining standpoint, there's a lot of opportunities here. But I've pretty well relinquished this to Joe because he has a much more rapport with our elected officials. But I have to be very candid.
He's smooth.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm a little abrasive when it comes to those people. But I was really upset when on the contacts I had with one of our legislators or his staff, when they told me, he said, well, Bill, you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist.
Oh, really?
And I thought to myself, from your perspective, that's probably true. You have your frontal lobe and you have all your limbs and they're working properly. But those veterans who aren't so fortunate don't fall into that category. So I'll turn it over to Joe and let him tell you where we've been and where we're going and where we hope to be in a year or so. Joe? He sounds real anxious, doesn't he?
He's trying to be circumspect.
I think my rapport is because they know I'm the only person standing between them and Bill and all of his followers. So it's like we'd rather talk to Joe, but everybody has a limit on their patience, and we formed a 501c3 about a year ago because right at the moment we're working on our second governor and our third IDVA director since we started all this, and each one of them wants to come up with something that, well, the previous IDVA directors, I don't want to alienate anyone we have right now, because our current director, Linda Chapelavia, who is a veteran, who spent, I believe, 8 years in the legislature sitting on the Veteran Affairs Committee. So, a very knowledgeable person and someone who knows who does what, how to turn the wheels. And so she's our third director, and she has expressed her desire to see something happen here. They also understand at this point that when we meet again, hopefully here shortly, we don't want to have the first thing that comes out of their mouth is what we need to do, because we've done everything everybody before them has asked, and we haven't seen the state do anything yet. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen Central Management Services, who controls that property, do anything. So it's always about what we need to do.
Yeah.
Well, we're out of things we need to do. We need to see it come from the other side, and I think they understand that frustration level and the patience level is starting to get fairly thin. And we're kind of reaching that point that if you want to continue to spend $300,000 a year to maintain that property for nothing, which they have the last 16 years, and let's add the $5.5 million that they spent to build those 4 homes. That have never had the key turned in them for what they were built to do.
Well, Joe, should be. In addition to that, though, we had the superintendent's building. We spent what, 1.3 mil, 1.4 million rehab it. Where judge is.
I don't know. It was an ungodly figure. It's so we as taxpayers on one piece of property that have spent millions of dollars, and then.
And it just sits there fallow.
Pardon?
It just sits there.
Is it
well, no, that's not
at
true,
this
Bill.
point?
I think in the defense of the state, I think we have to say that the SWAT team for the state police use one building on an itinerary basis. Another building is being used by traveling state people who have to visit for inquiries, rather than paying a motel bill. And the warden of the gated communities we have south of town occupies one, which is very upsetting to me. I think he should be a member of the community rather than isolated out on that property. And of course, Judge Turner's in the old superintendent's house. But they are being used in a way that's not best use. And we've even had NGOs come in, non-government organizations come in and say, listen, we can help you do this. And I speak specifically of Christian Homes. Help us run this thing. You have the expertise. You have the people. You know that you have the knowledge. And what we were, 175,000 short of making the thing work. But we're willing to spend $300,000 a year to maintain them. So it's quite a riddle, and I simply don't understand why we're not able to do it.
Well, we appreciate the fact that somebody is taking an interest in trying to make something productive out of something right now is just like a pulling the blood out of you with no return.
Exactly.
Well, Bill, this goes back. Joe and I have been working on this for over 4 years. And we've had a number of meetings. In fact, we've had 2 or 3 meetings on the property out there with different state officials. We learned very quickly that CMS in Springfield is a fiefdom that's very difficult to break into. So the answers aren't there, and I don't understand why they aren't there.
Our guests this morning have been Bill Dennis and Joe Schaler, 2 of the Marine Corps League guys that kind of crank the wheels and make things go. And we appreciate it. You know, in any organization that's successful, you have to have somebody that's cranking a wheel. And so we're going to call you the wheel crankers, for one of a better word. Well, it's nicer than Jarhead.
How about pitchfork?
That's fair enough.
Right.
Fair enough. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the service that you've given to your country, gentlemen. Viewpoint tries to bring interesting people, interesting philosophies, interesting stories to the listeners. We hope you enjoyed our efforts this morning. This is Bill Gossett and Judy Busby signing off with our usual, be the reason somebody smiled today. Go ahead, Mr. Ryan.